as a woman, you have no business comparing your body count to a man's body count. It doesn't matter how much y'all keep trying to make us be equivalent to men or make it seem like we can do what the men can do. We simply just cannot. And one day y'all gonna realize that we're not like men. I got something. Hold on. This is Ariana and this is Mike. Start with Big Mike. Big Mike, he outside. This is Big Mike. This is obviously the top of his penis. Inside of here is all the women that Big Mike like to, you know, have sex with. Okay? This is all his sperm. Big Mike just hit Amanda. Big Mike just hit Terica, Aaliyah, Brandy, Glow, Lotto, Meg the Stallion, Alicia, Deborah, Keisha, Shabria, Leah, Tay-Tay, Yolanda, Carissa, Paris, London, Terica, Tiffany, Sade, Mariah, Kelsey, Linda, Candace, Tara, I don't know who the last name should be, but pretty much that's just a big body count for him, right? Okay, up, wrong top. So boom, he done let loose in so many women, and guess what? His stuff that he has to let loose is swimming around in many different women. You know, it's just swimming around, and now he's a little on empty until he refills. And Big Mike is back outside for a hot boy summer, and he ready to go hit about 40 more girls. Okay, got some Lysol, aka body wash, soap. Big Mike is in the shower. He wiping himself down on the outside. Ain't got nothing in the inside. His penis is still his penis. Voila. Big Mike is ready to go hit 40 more girls. As you can see, fresh is new on the outside. Now we got the girl who want to say, well, if Mike can do it, Mike can do it, I can do it. I'm about to be outside too, just like Mike. Mike had 40 girls. I'm about to go give me 40 dudes. Like, I mean, why y'all want to try to always do like a double standard? So now you got the girl who wants to be like Big Mike. Let's see how that goes for her. She started off by messing with Big Mike. Got a little Big Mike. She wanted to mess with Terrion. She wanted to mess with big dope boy Derek. She wanted to mess with Scamming Leo. She also wanted to mess with Dewan. She wanted to mess with the dude that always take her out to get lunch. Ugh. She wanted to mess with Rico. Who else did she want to mess with? She wanted to mess with Jules. Then she ended up getting into like a long-term relationship, and so she really just, you know, messed with him a lot. So now we're going to accumulate her body count, and as women, you're getting things that's being injected inside of you, whereas Big Mike was the one doing the pushing outside of him. So now you got you walking around, a girl who wanted to live a hot girl summer, done went and tried to get her body count up, and this is how you being looked at. Big Mike's still in good tack. He's not receiving anything. He's just pushing it out. And all they got to do is clean off the outside. Doesn't matter if you get some Lysol and wipe yourself off just like Mike. Because Mike wiped himself off. And guess what? You take showers every day too, shoot. You in the shower, you wash it up real good. Matter of fact, we love to smell good. Got some Dolce Light. So now sis even look good. Sis smell good. She done wiped herself off clean as ever. But guess what? You done moved around disgustingly as a woman. Nobody's going to forget that you have that look to yourself because you done played yourself and messed with so many different men. You see the difference, ladies? So in case y'all ever wanted to know what the difference between a man having a bunch of sex and giving penis versus a woman having a lot of sex and receiving penis, this is the difference. Stop comparing yourself to men. Unless you want to walk around looking nasty, looking contaminated, looking dirty, looking trashy, looking skanky, and people are not going to forget this look. That's your reputation. They're not going to forget how you look. Then stop trying to compare yourself to men. There's no comparison.
A woman's womb, a woman's vagina goes inward. It's inside of her. She's receiving, she's receptive, she's absorbing when she lays with these different men. Women are inherently receivers. They're supposed to absorb their husband's knowledge and wisdom and his guidance and direction. And physically speaking, they receive his penis, they receive his sperm, and potentially his child, his seed within their bodies. And they also receive spiritual imprints from the men with whom they are sexually intimate. And the genetic factor in this is known as microchimerism, where women have been found to carry male DNA even without ever having children. It is believed that one way this male DNA is transferred is through sexual intercourse, which is to say that a woman can carry the DNA of the men that she has been intimate with in her body. And there are several studies that have concluded this. I'm going to read a few here. So in our modern society, this information is often obscured from the public. They don't want people to know about this because there is a prevailing push towards promoting sexual liberation for women. This study says male microchimerism in women with systemic sclerosis and healthy women who have never given birth to a son. Now, we're not going to read the whole study. It says the objective is to determine the frequency of male microchimerism in healthy women or women with systemic sclerosis who had never given birth to a son. In other words, male DNA within these women. Let's look at the conclusion. The conclusion says microchimerism with male DNA can be found in the circulation of women who have never given birth to a son. Thus, sources other than a male birth must be considered when male DNA is used to measure microchimerism. In other words, we understand that women would have male DNA if they've given birth to male sons. That makes sense. But these women had not given birth to male sons and are sometimes still found with male DNA within their bodies. It says, although other studies are needed, there was no apparent difference in women with systemic sclerosis and healthy women. Possible sources of male DNA include unrecognized male pregnancy or unrecognized male twin, an older male sibling with transfer through the maternal circulation, or sexual intercourse alone. So they're saying that one of the possible sources of the male DNA being inside these women other than an unrecognized pregnancy that they may have had, or an unrecognized male twin, or an older male sibling that transferred that DNA to them through maternal circulation somehow. They're saying that sexual intercourse is a plausible reason why women would have this DNA within them. Here's another study. We're just going to read the conclusion. It says, male microchimerism was not infrequent in women without sons. Besides known pregnancies, other possible sources of male microchimerism include unrecognized spontaneous abortion, vanished male twin, an older brother transferred by the maternal circulation, or sexual intercourse. And when women have this male DNA within them that could come from various sexual partners, there is the possibility for that DNA to be passed down to the seed of another man. In other words, if you take on a wife that's not a virgin and you reproduce with her, there is the potential for your child to carry some of that other man's DNA. The woman is the soil, and the soil is not to be polluted, as the scriptures make clear. So as you can see on the screen here, the title of this study says, Revisiting Polygyny. Offspring inherit an acquired characteristic of their mother's previous mate. So it's going to talk about offspring inheriting from the previous sexual mate of the mother. Now, I'm not going to read all of this. I'm going to skip down. So we can read here where it says discussion. It says, our results show that it is possible for a male to transmit features of his phenotype via non-genetic semen-borne factors to his mate's subsequent offspring sired by another male. Do you understand what that just said? That just said that the previous male is able to transmit features of his phenotype through semen-borne factors to the children of the female that she has with another male. Do you understand that? And then I'm not even going to read all of this. Reading here at the bottom, starting here, it says, our study thus confirms the possibility of polygyny via non-genetic, i.e. transgenerational plasticity, effects on non-offspring. The phenomenon reported here represents a new type of non-parental transgenerational effect and a novel source of variation in phenotype and fitness with potential consequences for sexual coevolution. In other words, what they just explained to you is that the DNA sequence of the offspring itself is not directly changed. And that's why, as we know, if a biological father of a child takes a blood test, he will come back as 99.9% likely to be the father, even if the mother was a prostitute. He's still 99.9% likely to be the father. But what they're explaining here is that the previous male's DNA contains elements that are affecting the genome or the gene expression of the mother's future offspring. So in other words, the male is passing down some of his features, some of his traits, because his sperm is affecting the female, that's being passed down to another male's offspring. And this is known as telegony, which is a phenomenon that modern science began to deny around the early 1900s, because if modern people knew that this applied to humans, it would greatly discourage women from being promiscuous, and it would discourage men from being with promiscuous women. And that's not something that the powers that be can allow. So it's very revelatory to read that article and to see that although in the 20th century, modern science denied that telegony was real, now they're saying, wait a minute, it actually is real. And in ancient times, this was already known to be a fact. But again, recently in the 20th century, they said telegony doesn't exist. But now they're showing, as we just read, that it actually does. And here's an article, as you can see, from 1896. I'm not going to read all of it. It says, "Sir, from many experiments and observations spread over 30 years, I can confirm the statement of Dr. W.H. Weber in his interesting note in the British Medical Journal of October 10th. The lasting effects of coition in animals, both with male and female, are to my mind conclusive. I only selected about half a dozen experiments, which I think speak for themselves." And I'm not going to read all of this. I'm just going to read the first one. It says, "A white sow was sired by a black Berkshire boar." So that's a white pig that had relations with a black boar. It says, "and produced a litter of black and white pigs." It says, "This sow was next sired by a red Tamworth boar. And although there was no black in either of the parents, so the red boar went on next to mate with this white pig." And so it says, although there was no black in either one of them, the progeny, the descendants, the offspring, were red, black, and white. The patches of black being very conspicuous. So that's just one example of a report of telegony. And this should also help you understand why Deuteronomy 25 verse 5 explains that when a man dies and he had no children, his brother is to marry and reproduce with his widow to raise up children for him, which are going to be considered the children of the dead man, his dead brother. And it doesn't necessarily have to be his biological brother, but it can be another male relative, a close male relative, similar to what happened with Boaz and Ruth. And so they're going to raise up seed, and that seed is going to be who? The seed of the dead man. Because that man who died, even though that child is biologically the child of his brother who's having sex with his widow, he's able to pass down some of himself to that next generation, because he left that in his woman. He left some of his self in his soil, in his earth, in his land, which is what the woman is. As it says here, it says responses of genes in females to sex revealed in fruit flies study. Sex can trigger remarkable female responses, including altered fertility, immunity, libido, eating and sleep patterns, by the activation of diverse sets of genes, according to research from the University of East Anglia. Publishing today in the journal Proceedings of the Royal Society B, the researchers study how female Drosophila melanogaster, or fruit flies, respond to mating. They discovered that a single protein found in semen generates a wide range of responses in many genes in females, which become apparent at different times and in different parts of the female's body following mating. So we're seeing how semen affects females. As I've already alluded to, a man's semen, when it impregnates her, it takes over her body, so to speak. It says the findings could in principle be akin to responses in many animals, including humans, where sperm and semen is released inside the female's body during sex. It said this seminal fluid protein changed the expression of a remarkable array of many genes in the female. So this is what I was explaining to you, brothers, that when a woman lays with a man and he leaves that DNA, he leaves that imprint, he leaves that mark, he leaves those fluids in her, he's leaving some of himself behind inside of that woman. It showed that the semen protein is a master regulator, which ultimately means that males effectively have a direct and global influence on the behavior and reproductive system of the female. Such effects may well occur across many species.
It showed that the semen protein is a master regulator, which ultimately means that males effectively have a direct and global influence on the behavior and reproductive system of the female. Such effects may well occur across many species.
So we're going to read from this article. It says, fetal genes in mother's blood, a novel mechanism for telegony. And oftentimes you have to go to the East to get this type of information. And you can see this is from China. Now, I'm not going to read the majority of this article. I'm just going to read a little bit. It says, abstract. Telegony is a discredited genetic phenomenon that a previous male may influence the characteristics of offspring subsequently born by the same female to another male. Although its reality was acknowledged by such authorities as Charles Darwin and Herbert Spencer, it has been met with skepticism because of a lack of understanding of the theoretical basis for telegony. So he said it was acknowledged, but he said it's been met with skepticism because of a lack of understanding of the theoretical basis for telegony. It says, with the discovery of fetal genes in mother's blood, the penetration of somatic cells by sperm, so that's to say that the sperm, when it goes into a woman, it doesn't only go into her ovum. It also may embed its genetic information in other tissues of her body. It says, and the ability of RNA to program genome rearrangement mechanisms might exist for telegony. So I'm going to skip down to the end. Concluding remarks. It says, in the history of genetics, neglect of certain findings and phenomena is not uncommon. For example, both Mendel's work on plant hybridization and McClintock's work on transposable elements were ignored for decades. And for those who don't know, Mendel is considered to be the father of modern genetics by many. It says the phenomenon of telegony is potentially genuine despite its rare occurrence. It says a woman may have, by a second husband, children who resemble a former husband.
It says a woman may have, by a second husband, children who resemble a former husband.
So this next article says, Uterosomes, the lost ring of telegony. And as I said, you often have to go to the east. We see that this is from Iran. But it says telegony refers to the appearance of some characteristics of the female's previously mated male in her subsequent offspring by another male. According to evidence, telegony may occur either through the infiltration of sperm into the somatic tissues of the female genital tract, or the presence of fetal genes in the mother's blood. So that means, as I already described, the sperm goes not only to the ovum only, but sperm can go in the uterus and lodge itself or lodge its DNA in other tissues of the female, of her genital tract, it says here. Skipping down, it says here, the possible integration of fetal DNA stemmed from the mother's previous partner into the genome of the mother's future fetus by a different male may influence the personality of the subsequent progeny. Do you understand what that means? That means that if a woman is pregnant by a male's child or offspring, and she has the fetus inside of her, and so that DNA, those cells, gets into her blood. What this is saying here is that later on down the line, when she gets pregnant by a different male, that male's child can be influenced by the DNA of the previous male's child to the degree that it influences their personality. It says male cells have been found in women with no history of male children or abortion. And we already read about that. It says suggesting that these cells were transmitted from female sexual partners during sexual intercourse. So again, we've already been over the basics of microchimerism. We're going to read a little bit from this article. It says telegony, the sire effect, and non-Mendelian inheritance mediated by sperm, a historical overview, and modern mechanistic speculations. And just to break down that title a little bit, when it says the sire effect refers to the influence that a male may have on his offspring, or in this case, the offspring that a female has with a future subsequent male. And when it says non-Mendelian inheritance, that refers to inheritance that may not follow the usual patterns described by Gregor Mendel. Because remember, I mentioned earlier that he is known for his basic rules of genetics, or is called the father of modern genetics. And when it says mediated by sperm, obviously that refers to the fact that sperm may play a role in this inheritance. So we're just going to read a little bit of this article, starting here in this section where it says possible data in respect of the existence of telegony. It says, let me zoom in a little bit. It says, it should be noted that some dog and sheep breeders, as a rule, still adhere to the idea. To what idea? To telegony. And several sheep breeders associations even refuse to register lambs whose mother were ever impregnated by mating with a common ram. So what that means is, among breeders, this is already something that has been believed for much time, to the degree that, as it says here, several sheep breeders associations take telegony seriously, and they account for telegony when they decide how they're going to breed their sheep. It says Zellner observed the phenomenon of telegony in rabbits and argued that telegony did not occur rarely as was previously thought. Do you understand what that means? That means he argued that telegony happened often, that it was not something that's rare. because some people will say, or at least used to say, that it happens rarely. He said, no, this happens all the time. Interestingly, a telegony phenomenon or sire effect has also been observed in the immune system of mice when normal females and this is similar to the experiment we already read about regarding rabbits. It's almost the same. It says when normal females that had borne at least 3 litters to males made tolerant neonatally were subsequently mated to normal non-immune males. So again, the female mice had offspring by male mice, and these male mice were immune. They were tolerant. That's what it's saying here. But it's saying that later, these same female mice had offspring by other males that were not tolerant. And what does it say? It says the offspring showed a hypo-responsive phenotype that did not differ from that of the progeny of fathers made tolerant neonatally. In other words, the offspring appeared to have immunity or tolerance as if they were the offspring of the previous male sexual partners of the female mice. So this is another example of telegony. It says the response of this offspring was significantly lower than the response of mice born to normal females mated only to normal males. What that means is the response of the offspring to whatever it was that they were testing them with was significantly lower than regular mice whose parents were not immune. In other words, it appeared, as I already mentioned, that they had the immunity or they had the tolerance as if they were the offspring of the previous males that the females had sex with. It says this type of observation has also been reported by Cooper, Willis et al. In addition, Sobey and Cannoli demonstrated that male domestic rabbits mating after recovering from myxomatosis may transmit immunity to progeny born to the female in the next 7 months, including progeny sired by other males lacking immunity. And we already read about that with rabbits. It says this has been confirmed by later researchers. It says, although always largely an animal breeder's issue, telegony is also invoked in ideas about human inheritance. A remarkable illustration of telegony in humans has been observed and recorded, and that should say recorded, by Lingard. It says in which a hypospadian, and a hypospadian is a man who has an aberration with his penis, a deformity. It says in which a hypospadian whose father and paternal grandfather were similarly malformed contracted a marriage with a woman not related to him who bore him 3 sons, hypospadians. So a man who had this malformity in his penis married a woman that had 3 sons with her, and this woman was not related to him. It says he died a few years after the birth of his 3 sons. His widow, within 18 months after his death, contracted a second marriage. The husband in this instance not being a hypospadian and having no history of any such deformity in his family. So her subsequent husband that she married within 18 months later did not have this deformity. He was not a hypospadian. It says by this marriage she had 4 sons, all hypospadians. Do you see that? These are various instances recorded by science of telegony. And there's a reason why this is ignored in today's day and age, why it's pushed to the side, why they act like it's not real. It says Sedgwick believed that this case might help to overcome some of the objections that have been urged against the influence of a previous marriage on the subsequent offspring by a second or even by a third husband. Thompson cited the case of a woman married to a deaf mute by whom she had one deaf mute child. So a woman married a man who was deaf and a mute, and they had a child who was deaf and a mute. It said by a second normal husband, she had a deaf mute child, and then others who were normal. So she got remarried, had a second husband who was normal, and had another deaf mute child. It says there's also evidence for telegony in modern China. For example, 2 Chinese women gave birth to children after they married their second husband. Interestingly, the appearances of their children closely resemble their first husband.